Hello and welcome to Marketing Insights with Luan and Laura. My name is Luan Wise. I'm a marketing consultant, have worked throughout my marketing career of 20 plus years in agency roles, client-side roles, and running my own business. When you watch this session, I will also have just published my second book called Planning for Success, which is all about social media marketing planning. And there is lots of insights into my work with clients, my teaching, training course insights, and case studies from people that I've spoken to throughout the course of my career working on social media.
And I'm Laura Chamberlain. I'm a Professor of Marketing at Warwick Business School. So I am an academic. I do research, teaching and consultancy. And I'm also founder of the Talk, Think, Do group, which is about empowering achievement across marketing, business and management. So lots of different things that we both do. And this series is born out of our love of talking to each other about marketing and wanting to share our insight and our thoughts to stimulate conversation, really, not saying that we are the be all and end all knowledge of everything marketing, but because we have very different working lives and a common passion for marketing, quite often we have very fruitful and interesting conversations that kickstart ideas, and we thought it'd be really cool to share some of those. So as Luan says, this is a pre-record because by the time you're watching this, I will be on maternity leave, and so I will be otherwise engaged at this point. But we will be back doing live sessions very, very soon. But we didn't want to stop our conversations, and we wanted to still have some content available. And so we've pre-recorded this whilst I am in the throes of the start of maternity leave for you to enjoy. And what we're talking about today, Luan?
Well, we picked a topic. So if you've watched any of our sessions previously, we have often picked something that's in the news, we've picked an academic paper, we've picked something topical, we've talked about our research that we've worked on together. And today, for this session, we have picked on a topic that is in the book, has been in lots of papers, has been fundamental to your teaching work, my training work as well. I wanted to talk about audiences and customer personas, and to bring that into my day-to-day work, the topic of algorithms. We've had a bit of a chat about this before, and this is why we thought it'd be interesting. So shall I start with why I think it's interesting and a challenge? Is because in the world of social media that I'm in, and the communities that I'm in, and the conversations that I have, this word algorithm comes up all the time. And actually it's a word I really try and avoid using until someone asks me a question. And my reason for that is because it's so unknown. It's a techie thing that we know exists and that is updated all the time and sits behind social media platforms and online platforms. But it feels like, I'm already getting excited about this, it feels like it's an obsession for people to talk about the algorithm and hack the algorithm and how does the algorithm work and the algorithm this and the algorithm that. And I don't like talking about it because I don't think it should be so top of mind for everyone.
I'm laughing because I know how passionate you are about this. It's so interesting because whenever people start talking about algorithms, it makes me, and this is showing my age, think about Sonic the Hedgehog and like different levels to a video game, like collecting gold rings, and like there must be a secret level that if you know where the secret gold rings are, you can go into the secret level with your Sonic the Hedgehog, and then you understand the algorithm. And that is just not the case. Like all the social media platforms are really transparent about communicating information about their algorithm. Of course, be aware of what is going on and what they're prioritizing. But this idea that it's like a game, there's a secret land of algorithm understanding, that there's something that some people know that other people don't know, that they need to hack an algorithm, it just all starts to become a little bit ridiculous, frankly. I'm going to say it. And there's a line to be travelled between figuring out how things work and being measured and understanding it and being knowledgeable about it. And then sort of this hysteria that comes attached to the magic of understanding the algorithm, or the algorithm being this evil force that we've got to somehow beat. Like it just feels a bit the language around it and the narrative can feel a bit farcical at times, which is why I know that this is something that you feel quite passionate about.
I'm going to sit on my hands. I think there's a few things in here already to unpick, and one of them is, I've already moved. My book is about planning. I am a planner, and as much as you can plan, I do also acknowledge that sometimes magic happens and the unexpected happens. And if we talk about, maybe it's another topic, Laura, going viral, we can't plan for that. Sometimes these things happen. There is magic. It is not all completely planned. If it was, then we would have the silver bullet answer. You said about the platforms are very transparent. And for me, that is where, if we're going to talk about algorithms and understand algorithms, where we should take our information and insights from. When the platforms say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're prioritizing, this is what we are working on, and take it directly from them. Also add in our own insights from testing and learning and seeing what works for us. It's the, I can't remember what word you use now, it's the myths, the hacks of the content that we see that says, oh, you need to do this, and tomorrow you need to do that, and oh, you need to do this. And yes, that may absolutely work for those people, but it doesn't mean it works for everyone in your own context. And it feels a bit like Chinese whispers, that one person says it and then the next one adds something else. And if I can't find an original source for something, I'm not sure I always believe it.
Yeah, and look, I'm not here to discredit anybody, of course, but you end up with sort of narratives around like, oh, there's an optimal number of emojis to use in a post, or and unless that's based on some kind of scientific research around the mix of visual and text and how people process information, and there's like a piece of academic research that's been done that's actually looked at that, where's that come from? And what works for one audience may not work for another audience, or one context for another context. But even if you look at it, like if you look at you and I, for example, Luan, you would lump us together in a really similar demographic, right? So segmentation wise, you probably put us together. We would be, an ideal customer. But the way that I like things compared to the way that you like things might be really different. And that's an individual difference factor. And of course, you can't account for that. So people conflate a lot of different things, like this is the best way to optimize your post by doing X. It's not based on any science. There's no psychology, understanding of information processing or anything that behind it other than trial and error or what's worked for them. And then also it doesn't allow for diversity within an audience. And so this is where actually the algorithms conversation for me neatly fits hand in hand with this idea around personas and really understanding your customers and your audience, and the fact that you do need to keep things fresh, and you can't do the same every time you post and all that kind of stuff, because there is diversity within the same segment, right? So there's a lot there around how do you approach dealing with algorithms, because they exist, they're not going anywhere, they actually serve a purpose, they're not this evil force that needs to be defeated. In fact, quite a lot of people use them to help them. And then also, how do we think about our customers and our audience and our consumers? So the two A's, I guess, are algorithms and audience for this session.
So before we dive into that and go into, for me, there's the, you mentioned about this is how things are presented, and for me, I think that's why I start getting animated about it, because I think sometimes with these hacks and these ways of getting around things and what to do and what's changed is presented in such a way as everyone has to do it, and you're almost crazy if you don't do it. And for me, that creates absolute overwhelm and fear for people that aren't going to do something for 10 minutes before they post and then do this and then click here. It's too much for people. And of course, when you teach and when I teach from practitioner's point of view, we are sharing our experiences and what perhaps has worked for us or what we've seen. So we're not kind of saying dismiss anything that's working. It's more trying to turn it into a dark art and stopping anything happening than this overthinking. And, you know, if I'm in a room full of busy business professionals for an hour talking about how to use social media, I'm just happy if I walk away going that people will do something different, something new, something that they hadn't thought about before, rather than spending an hour going, right, you all need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's confusing, and for me it's the way those things are presented.
But if everybody did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, everything would look the same, and people wouldn't engage with it. So by default, that would then mean that audience engagement reduced, right? So
it presents a whole nother challenge for that kind of insights. If we go back to what are the platforms telling us the algorithms do, then for me, I feel absolutely comfortable with those insights, but also that what they're telling us is that they prioritize what we see based on what we engage with. So we all know that when we use social media that we start following thousands of people and we don't see it all, and we don't do enough housekeeping to unfollow what we're not interested in and tell Facebook that we no longer like those films or those groups. We tell it that by not liking things and not engaging with things. So for me, the logical, rational part of my brain does say, if I like every post you do, Laura, on Instagram, I'm going to see more of your stuff. I see that as a helpful thing and a logical thing, and then does encourage us to write content for our audience and write for engagement. And that's what it's about, and we'll get the results versus the 2 emojis plus this plus that in this time frame and stuff.
And it's interesting because it actually speaks to like a marketing debate that's as age-old as any, which is this idea of looking after the people who already engage with you, as well as acquiring new customers, followers, whatever that may be, right? So I mean, as you were talking then, it just sort of made me reflect on conversations that I've been hearing recently and that happen in marketing all the time. Is like, how should you look after the people that do engage with you, that are your customer base? Some would call them loyals. There's a whole can of worms around that I'm not going to get into now. I have quite strong views on. But then also, how do you lead gen? How do you bring in new followers, customers, etc., people who are not familiar with you? And you know, that's exactly what we're talking about. So it's just another iteration of that age-old marketing conundrum, as it were. Is like, how do you think about these different groups of people, and how do you appeal and increase engagement between the people who already like you and like what you're doing? And when I say like, I don't just mean click the like button. I mean as a general concept of engagement. And then how do you get more people on board and to know about you and be aware of you and buy from you ultimately, because that's, you know, usually what we're trying to do, although not always, of course. And so it's not, this isn't rocket science, like that fundamental principle behind it. And then sort of, I think people layering on this idea of an algorithm on top and sort of beating the algorithm or all this kind of stuff takes people away from those fundamental ideas.
And what works, because it has been around for so long and we've studied it and we've taught it and we've tried it and used it traditionally, is this focus on who is it we want to talk to. And if you have watched any of our previous sessions over the past couple of months, we've been talking about research, and what came up in there was things around understanding the business plan and setting objectives and knowing what to measure. And this is another marketing fundamental around knowing who your audience is and who you need to talk to. And if you get that right, you will see success. And if you don't know who you're talking to and you don't know what they need to know and your core content, then any hack is not going to be successful. I would use the word, and we're talking audiences and algorithms, audiences have to be at the heart of what we're doing.
Oh, 100%. And it goes back to marketing 101. Like, as soon as you start talking about, you know, what is marketing, you know, whenever I do an introductory lecture, like what is marketing, the fundamentals of market orientation, it's customer orientation. So it's all about your customer at the end of the day. That's how it should be. And that's the thing people lose sight of the most. And so audience over algorithms. And just to go back round to sort of thinking about algorithms and trends, because often algorithms sort of go hand in hand with trends as well, right? And so personas not being static is really important because people respond to trends. So what I often like to do is think about if there's a trend or something that's happening at this point in time, or a point in time, how are my personas responding to, or how are my customers, represented by my personas, responding to this current trend? So whether that's something like a movie that's been released and has taken over social media at that point in time, whether there's a social movement, whether there is something in the news, a geopolitical thing going on, whatever it may be, or it may be something that's like a TikTok trend, for example. There's one that I'm particularly thinking of at the moment. How would my personas respond to that? So what's my temperature check with my customers, and then what's the way my personas are responding to that? So they're not static, they move. And going back to this idea of, what I was saying about how many emojis should you have in a post and all this kind of stuff, that also helps with thinking about content, but also how you frame content, how you then think about how you want to communicate with your customers in terms of the granular detail of how you're constructing your posts. And I think seeing personas as something that's a dynamic tool rather than, I've done my persona, here it is, check, is also something that's super important, particularly in social media, because of how quick conversations and move on into how things change and things happen in the world. So for me, I think it's a balance though, right? Because you can't update your persona every day.
No, you can't. But I think the fact is that they shouldn't be this document, as some people may think so much of strategic planning or theory can be of like, I do this and I've done it and I pop it in a drawer and I revisit it once a year. It becomes your checklist. So you just talked about trends, and you would see a trend and think about how your personas are affected by it or what's happening. But those trends should also be, trends come out and, people may go, I need to get involved with this because it's a trend. Your persona should be your sense check of, is this relevant to them? I'm only going to get involved in this trend if it is relevant. And you're only going to know that answer if you know your personas well enough. If you treat them like this person and go, would this person be interested in this movie, this dance, this trend, this what's happening? And so I think it's about making sure that whatever we do, that we have someone in mind. And the reason I think I pin this one person is because my understanding of personas is give them a name, bring them to life and talk about them within your organization as this name as well, so that they are at the heart of what you're doing.
It's an interesting one, like the naming one. You can get contradictory advice on that, actually, like, because some people say don't give it a name because then that gives it a gender, and it gives it may give it a gender, and actually that can always become too restrictive. So it's not one size fits all, and it depends how you work. So some people are now moving away from giving their personas like a humanized name. They'll talk about a group of people represented by a persona who's like a striving achiever or something, rather than saying like Sarah. So they'll talk about their persona being a striving achiever, which takes away some perhaps unconscious biases and things like that. That's an internal conversation, really, but the principles are still really, really strong in terms of bringing this to life. And just to circle back around to what you were saying about how people respond to trends and your personas respond to trends and what's going on in the world, I often see bandwagon jumping. So if there's something going on in the world and people are like, we have to say something about this, it's the right thing to do, it doesn't resonate with their customers, and they just look like they're jumping on a bandwagon or saying something because it's the right thing to do. Of course, there are times when doing the right thing to do is important, but leave it there. If you've done the right thing and you've got nothing more to say on the matter, don't keep going. And the flip of that then becomes making brands feel inauthentic to their customers. So if you make a statement about a political situation or a social movement that's happening, and you say, you know, we support this, and then that manifests in nothing other than an empty social media post that you're not showing your support in any other way, people see straight through that.
Yeah.
So that's worse than if you actually know that that cause or that thing really matters to your persona, to your customers, your audience. That means that your credibility diminishes immediately. So it's that depth of understanding and actually thinking it through, that a persona is a tool that allows you to do that. Like how would my persona feel if I just put up a post about something and used that as a tick box, like, oh yeah, we've addressed this issue, and then did nothing more? Well, what's my persona going to complain about?
Yeah.
What are they going to say?
I think this comes back to, why do we need these? And this is because we are not our customer, and we can't just do, oh, you know, I've had conversation. Yeah, I like that trend. I find it interesting, but I'm not my customer. And so I think the theory and the practice of using personas is so that it takes you out of you and what you like and what you're interested in, to make sure that it is relevant and then resonates with someone else.
Yeah, and it's all about developing empathy, right? So like somebody, so I do a whole in one of my courses that I teach, I do a whole thing about why empathy is actually a marketer's secret weapon. And we can't make assumptions around our audience. We can't assume that our customers think like us. And actually a lot of marketing, and it really comes to the fore in social media, is around the ability to understand how people who aren't like you think and feel and do things. And so our empathy muscle is one that we need to flex quite regularly. And somebody once said to me, you know, is empathy something that's natural, that you are an empathetic person or you're not, or is it something that you can learn? And in this context, when we talk about empathy through using tools like personas, is absolutely something that you can learn and something you can get better at doing. And being adept at thinking then about multiple different personas and looking at things from multiple different perspectives. The human being trait of empathy is something that's slightly different, like how empathetic you are as a person. But when we talk about it in marketing terms, using tools like personas really help us to sort of think about the point of view of other people, the voice, all that kind of stuff, sentiment, etc.
And I think we can then move on from how we create personas to then making sure that we're in those environments on social media and social media listening to see what they're thinking and concerned about. So one of the things I do quite often is, you know, I may see something on the news agenda and go, oh, okay, so I've got this thought about it. I'm going to go to, I'm reluctant to say Twitter because it may not be called Twitter by the time this gets watched, but people will know what I'm talking about. But I will go to Twitter and look at some key individuals and say, what are they talking about? Or I'll find the hashtag about the topic and go, oh, okay, so people are thinking about this in a slightly different way to I was, but are they my audience? Are they impacting my audience? Are they influencing my audience? So social media just becomes this huge real-time focus group barometer of what people are thinking and feeling about things as they come up.
Yeah, and actually that's a really nice point, Luan, because people say, I don't know where to start. Like, so I know who my persona is, but how am I going to find out what they're thinking and feeling? And that is a great example of a starting point. So, you know, who are their key opinion leaders? Starter for 10. What are they saying? And then look on social media around the issue or the thing that you want to know about, and figure out, you know, what the conversation is looking like with the people in the same demographic as your persona. It's a great starting point.
Yeah, Facebook groups are there, Twitter lists are there, know the influencers. And I think actually on my persona generator, I have a field for who are their influencers as well. So you can make sure you're using them. So it just means that social media just gets wrapped up, doesn't it, by insight, information, and real time. And this focus on your audience has got to be at the heart of everything. And we haven't said the word algorithm for a few minutes. So we can't hack it. You know, we could jump on the trend, but this isn't about that. This is about getting results by focusing on what matters.
You have just mentioned algorithms there, and I want to circle this back around because you talked, I just mentioned about this idea of like, where do I start? And also this idea of the algorithm. I'm not saying that the algorithm's not important. Of course it is, and we need to understand it, and we need to work with it alongside understanding our audience. We talked about the fact that understanding the algorithm, social media platforms themselves are really useful in terms of giving us information. It's in their interest to give us that information. But where else can people look for information about social media updates?
Thank you. Go directly to the platforms. So look at, follow the LinkedIn blog, go to the Facebook newsroom, go to the Instagram newsroom, go to the TikTok newsroom, get the information straight from the platforms, because if it's important enough for them to share, then get it directly from them. There are influencers, there are thought leaders, there are other websites. Social Media Examiner is very tactical with new things that come out. Social Media Today, Mashable, The Verge, TechCrunch. These are the websites that I check all the time, and we don't rehearse, we don't practice this, but this is the curated website that I built, is that I read this stuff all day, every day, and filter it through. So I've put it all onto one website called thelighthouse.social, curate the news around the platforms and the feature changes, because there is so much noise out there. But I also cross-check those things. So I'm in some Facebook groups where I know social media managers hang out. So I know that if there's a question or a concern, I can see what they're talking about and then go and try and find the original source or the news. So it is about kind of seeking information from the credible sources and cross-checking it. But if you'd like it all done for you, then I have done it.
But I think that's the key thing as well, is credibility.
Yeah.
And again, if you've watched any of these, we did one about learning that we released in September. And I think it's very easy to get swept up in conversations around stuff to do with social media, because things change so fast. And because people are constantly putting out information there. And I think there is something there as well around, particularly the algorithm chat, around sifting through and thinking critically around what information is credible, what information you should pay attention to, and what actually matters to your audience and your business, and almost having a triage rather than just consuming all the information possible, thinking I'm gonna be able to figure it out, because actually a lot of it is bluster, in my view.
But it's hugely overwhelming. If you are active on social media and this is part of your role, and you're following all this stuff that goes, oh, you now need to do this and you now need to do that, and stop doing this and stop doing that. Great, take it in and think about it, but don't think that you've got to dive into doing something tomorrow. What we've also talked about on previous sessions, and we will talk about again, is you will know if something's working for you by looking at your own data and insights. And you will find things that work for you and perform better than others against your own objectives. But because the world always changes, you have to always be testing and always be iterating and looking at the data. And that's ultimately where you're going to find if the algorithm has changed and had an impact on you, or there's a new feature that actually helps you or hinders you, is by you having this approach to always testing and always learning.
But also there's stuff there around not chasing the short-term numbers, thinking long-term as well. Like the phrase that just popped into my mind is social media is not the stock market. Like this idea of like crashes and good times, do you know what I mean? Like we're actually what social media is a tool to allow us to engage with an audience, to get a message across, in order to facilitate something we want to happen. Now that may be buying a product, it may be, there are lots of different things that we may want to be the thing that we want to happen. And that doesn't matter if you're B2C, B2B, not-for-profit, etc. But often it's the long game. But when we start talking about algorithms and we start talking about metrics, people get very hung up on like chasing the number and it almost feeling a bit stock markety, like, oh, everything's crashed or
sell.
You know what I mean? And I'm not a financial person by any stretch, but it was just this thing that just suddenly popped into my head then. It's like, it's not, there will be ups and downs, and there will be things that work and things that do really well, and unexpectedly even, and things that don't go so well. That's part of the nature, but it is always the longer game, in my view. And that's where having this dynamic understanding of your audience by using a persona tool becomes really, really important, so that you can track over the longer term, and not get caught up in, the very short term.
Well, and that's true, because no social media post works in isolation. There's always a context to what they've seen before, what they see afterwards, what they see above and below your post. But,
yeah, of course,
without going into a whole nother session around content pillars, but you don't just post one thing that's going to work all the time. You post a mixture. And, I've seen this. If you post something that is perhaps behind the scenes of your business, and perhaps a bit more human, but is a humanized piece of content versus here's a blog, here's a white paper, you will get different levels of engagement. But at the end of the day, you can't just do I've done a time lapse of me. One of the summits, I did a time lapse behind me for the whole morning, where you can see behind the scenes of my business. I can't just do that, but that puts some context to the summit when I'm promoting it. And this is, behind the scenes, and this is what it's all about. And here's the articles that come out of it, and here's the YouTube. So nothing works in isolation to have that piece of content.
Maybe I should do a time lapse of me designing a lecture.
Yeah.
I'd never thought of doing that before. Yeah. I need to up my game on my social media, but I'm not sure people want to see me sat just scratching my head and tapping away.
I think it's probably just as well that I was fixed to a seat to do it, rather than a normal working day where I'm coffee and snacks and moving around and stuff. But what I'm saying is, it's this algorithm hacking. You will never find a golden bullet for one post, because you have to have a mixture of content that's going to tell a story to your audience, and you need the personas to know what story to tell.
So, a piece of advice then from you, Luan, because if I'm listening and I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, okay, well, that's great. How do I keep it fresh? Because that then feels like quite a pressured thing. I've got to think of something new all the time, what people are going to think is interesting, and what I do isn't that interesting. The reality of what I do is not that interesting. I wasn't talking about myself then, but what I mean is, like, you can just imagine somebody sat there thinking, oh, that then feels like a lot of pressure to come up with unique, novel ideas to explain what I do or how I'm doing it. And that adds in another pressure, which then means it feels like a massive investment, resource, time, and then people just like, oh, I can't figure out. So how do you deal with that?
This will be different for every business. I'm a one-person business. There will be people watching this that are in very large organizations. I would say this comes back to you telling a story. So I'm telling a story on my social media around what I'm doing, what I'm working on, where I am, what I'm reading. I post a lot of pictures of books I'm reading, or where I'm working today, to build up a story so that people can get to know me and what I'm about. I know someone that's doing amazing stuff on Instagram. She's a maker, and she films regularly her making products and all the stages of making her products, and then she'll come on and talk about it. And it's almost like making social media part of your narrative so that people come along with you, rather than almost trying to do big things and different things. And then it just becomes a part of what you're doing. I look at my diary and go, oh, I'm here these 3 days. I must make sure that when I'm at a conference with you, that I take some photos and I film my journey. I did that as well. To drip feed rather than trying to do big things. And then I think if there happens to be something that doesn't particularly resonate with your audience, the next one will, and they'll see that it's part of a story and getting to know you. So it's
what
building
about
things
B2B
up.
then?
B2B, on site, what you're doing, what you're working on, where your people are, where they're networking. A lot of content as well for organizations is not just about selling your products and services, but it's about your employer brand. What is it like to work here? I've seen one of my clients this morning posting that they've all got donuts in the office. I really want to go in the office today. And that's really easy content to engage with, and very different to, we're doing this tomorrow and we're, doing that. It's about, I want to work with them and I want to write something about it. So building that, what it's like to work here, what the people are like, the environment, is also really important content for social media. And knowing that about personas will help you build it.
Because even stuff that may seem quote unquote superficial and not directly lead to a sale, right, may make the brand seem more friendly, more approachable. And I'm very specifically thinking about the B2B space here.
Yeah.
You set up the image of your company as somewhere like, oh, they're all really friendly, they're really nice. Yeah. I could feel like I could pick up the phone to them and they would answer the, like, it humanizes it, right? So everything has a purpose in some sense. It may not be selling the specific thing into another business. There may be something else around your social media content in the B2B space that makes you just breaks down some barriers, makes you seem more approachable, give people insight into your company culture, but even important issues. So one that just popped into my brain then as I was talking was I saw some really cool posts around sustainability initiatives within an organization in the B2B space. So really sort of starting to shine a light on stuff that they're thinking about, they're doing, questions they're asking themselves, and also how they're thinking about that across the supply chain. Yeah.
Did you know, fun facts, did you know our product does this? Did you know this is how it happens? This is what goes into the process. People do like that kind of educational as well as entertaining content. So I think once you start to sit down and think and plan, very rarely do I find people are short of content. It's more about giving it this framework and structure, which brings us back to having the tools in place like personas and measurement and smart objectives and things that we often talk about.
And it's quality of engagement, not quantity, right? Because people often get bogged down in like, I've got to have as many followers as possible. And if just thinking about, I've got a persona in my mind about something being like, well, nobody's really interested in this weird thing that we do at B2B. But actually the people who you want to engage with will be.
Yeah.
If you're looking to have thousands and thousands and thousands of followers, you're never going to achieve that because actually your target market's quite niche because of the nature of your business being quite niche. And that's okay. Like, I feel like there's still a bit of a narrative around, we need to amass as many followers and reach as many people as possible, which is where people come unstuck because they're like, well, not loads and loads of people aren't going to be interested in this quite niche content.
It's all about
square.
So it's all about conversation starters. And I think there's also, while we're going this route, and again, this could carry on, but not everything has to be public on social media. Like, very often I will see things and go, actually, I'm just going to drop that person a note or find someone at that organization and say, I've just seen that you've won an award and it's amazing. And, like, it's a conversation starter and it doesn't all need to be public. And if I do a social media post and get one conversation out of it, that's a win. I don't really mind how many likes or new followers I get as a result of it. It's building up that picture. So it's about knowing what you want to achieve and making sure that you include all of that, and it all builds up to a conversation at the end of the day. Isn't it about putting the social into social media?
Well, but ultimately it's, audience over algorithm.
I think that's the summary, isn't it? Audience over algorithm. So let's stop there before we start off another topic. If you carried on watching this session, thank you for joining us and listening to us talk. We hope you find it interesting. We will be back in 2024 with live sessions when Laura is back from maternity leave. Thank you for watching. I will include links to these persona generators, other sessions that we've done so that you can watch some of those as well. And thank you.
Bye.